We did become California girls in the end. It was where you finished raising us, of course, and if we had anything like permanent addresses after moving out, it was our apartments in Santa Monica. We did love returning to Chelsea, though. After a few years of auctions, we bought the building where the spider continued to make Mother's work in her studio. This is where we based the foundation, which was not an easy decision. We did not want it to be a continent away from where we spent most of our time, though we did eventually buy apartments in New York as well, because the foundation, it was so much fun in the 30s. I remember walking into the classrooms and we'd see a dozen 12-year-old girls watching Martha Rossler's semiotics of the kitchen. Sometimes boys attended, but there was such a stigma over that word feminist that we obviously didn't receive many applications from boys. Just 2% of our application pool many years. Even with free tuition, housing, chaperones, subsidized travel. The boys were welcome. They were always welcome. But it takes a long time for some people to allow themselves to be welcomed. The lopsidedness didn't matter, no. By the late 2030s, it was already difficult enough for our administrators to narrow down a final class each year. Because something funny had happened in the 30s, making our application pool jump exponentially. I don't believe Mother anticipated it. People gazed at the vessels as if they stared into the fountain of youth. They found everlasting life, in some way, some form. Most people, however, could not afford one of Mother's vessels. So, instead, as always happens when considering timeless art, somebody thought to themselves, why don't I do something similar? So first, other artists copied her and began asking their own coders to help them create sculptures long after their own deaths. And as Mother's basic idea became more widely known, people who weren't familiar with contemporary art at all began saying, well, why don't I do something similar? People do not want graves. They want a continuing legacy. So we suddenly saw artistic laymen working with coders, creating new life for themselves after death. Yes, they took it another step forward, of course. People injected their DNA into their sculptures. This wasn't so strange. Scientists had 3D printed replacement body parts for years by then. But this idea of creating sculptures after death with somebody's DNA, it introduced a dynamic that I'm not sure Mother wanted. People, at least their molecular building blocks, could truly go on living into the future if they could pay someone to maintain this output of sculptures after death. Some parents felt a need to emphasize that they knew how Mother's work more or less started these trends, probably to help their child's prospects of getting in. Which is fine. It made us happy to know how people still made the connection. But this concept of hers had probably become the most copied artistic idea since Robert Indiana's love sculptures. And like those pieces, however, most Americans could not name the original artist. On the street, Margaret and I once saw a poster advertising the Christie's auction in the next leftover fun. And this stranger looked at the vessel, and he told his friend next to him that it's a shame that an ancient artifact, he thought it was ancient. He apparently hadn't ever seen a mason jar before, but he said, it's a shame that an ancient artifact from somebody else's culture was being auctioned for millions. And we interjected, saying, actually, that was made by our mother, Celia Merode. And those strangers just stared back at us blankly and asking, who? Or what? Obviously thinking that we were insane. So things changed after 20 years. But many parents still wanted their kids to come to us. Margaret and I could very quickly tell which prospective students were interested in the printing concept, and not so much in mother and contemporary art. We hated saying no to the girls who were more interested in the concept. They were so enthusiastic, but their enthusiasm was misdirected, if only by a degree. After 2037, we made clear in our promotional materials that our students did not primarily focus on 3D printing, if at all. We wanted to explain in the Foundation's studies that women had invented contemporary art. Men had cornered painting and sculpture for millennia. However, we wanted to set in stone that women had pioneered everything that came after. Hilma af Klint invented abstract art. June Wayne used Ben-Day dots long before Liechtenstein. Joan Jonas was one of the first to use video. Vali Export may have been the first to broadcast video art on television. Hannah Wilke was the first to use an answering machine. Lynn Hirschman-Leeson was the first to use interactive laser discs. Senga Nengudi used nylons before Ernesto Neto. Mother was the first to make the 3D printer more than just part of the process. We wanted the students who might continue this complete history. August, yes. We loved visiting the Foundation every August during the students' final exhibition. I remember one striking piece where a girl wrapped a female mannequin in fine cords. And the cords, she somehow pulled them so tightly that the plastic of the mannequin buckled. And after she contorted the mannequin in this pained, awkward disfigurement, she loosened the cords at the mannequin's hips so that they splayed out as if they were a dress. Taken together, they actually did look like a dress on the mannequin's body. Many women in the 1970s had used rope or twine or tape in their art, tying themselves up. Yes, like Donna Hennes, Sonia Andrade, Françoise Génicot, Renata Eisenegger, Anna Grazotto, Margot Piz, Elaine Schmidt, and probably many others. And they photographed it, saying various things with the bondage, though none of the women knew that they shared the same idea at the same time. They were from all over the world, and information, as you know, did not travel so fast then. I asked the student if she found inspiration in any of these women, or if she had read about them in the Foundation's classes. But she said no, not these particular women. She said she was referencing Artemisia Gentileschi, the master Baroque painter, perhaps the only woman Baroque painter who is regularly studied today. Artemisia had been raped by another artist when she was in her late teens. In that trial, in order to prove that her testimony was credible, she was forced to undergo torture by way of the Sibyle, a series of cords wrapped around her fingers and tightened as she gave her testimony. If tightened too much, the bones in her fingers could be crushed, and if it went any farther, the fingers could simply be lopped off. No, the rapist underwent no such torture. As soon as our student said Artemisia, I looked again at the deformed mannequin and understood what she hoped to convey. But, the student told us, I don't want to imply that women shouldn't wear short skirts. It's really dynamic and complicated. I'm not sure it's all here yet. Yes, I really do believe that for a few years, we changed American culture with the Foundation. That's everything? Okay. It was a good one today. Can I ask you something, Maggie? Why did you wait until... I don't want to say until it was almost too late, but why did you wait until it was almost too late to do formal interviews with Margaret and me?